Hello YouTube, this is Dylan with High Grade Strategies. Today we're doing another video on a deck profile that I've done previously, but before we get to that, big news has recently come up that we're finally able to announce. The channel has been sponsored by Impact Gaming Center in Fairview Heights. They're a local game store that we go to, and you probably have seen from our Facebook group that I actually won their local tournament going 3-0, and that's actually what we're doing today, is a deck profile on the deck that I used. So we're going back to the blue-purple deck that I had built a couple weeks ago, and just showing you the upgrades that we have done to it. Fairly straightforward. We're going to go into the units. We've got 4 copies of the Grey's Custom and 4 copies of the Zero Gundam. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be pointing out the fact that I'm not running Gun Tank. The main reason for it is, in my local meta, I haven't really seen much of a need to play Gun Tank. If anything, I've seen more of a hindrance by playing Gun Tank if I'm not playing a ping strategy against my opponent. Most of the time when Gun Tank would come down, it was a dead body. It was small in comparison to the other units that are of the same cost, and wasn't nearly as effective. It couldn't get through the EX base, it couldn't do anything else, and if I was to leave it in hand to try and do something later on, it wound up being too late at that point. At that point, it was a slippery slope and would lose me matches. So, after some considerable test playing, I went to 0 gun tanks and then 4 on the Zero and the Greys. Beyond that, we're going to our level 3s. We've got 4 copies of the Barbatos First Form, which is pretty self-explanatory. Great draw engine, especially if you ping it off of Mikazuki or any of the other effects that allow you to do so. And then we're running 4 copies of the Hyakuren. A great early body that allows you to get through that EX base. It also allows you to pretty much go toe-to-toe with most people's early to mid-game units. Next, we're running 4 copies of the Gundam Barbatos Adept. Another pretty self-explanatory unit. The previous deck list that I had for this had only 2 copies, just because that's what I had access to. But bumping up to 4, I'm really starting to see the direct ping to major units with it. Plus, it's a big enabler for, again, the Barbatos First Form, or some of the other units that we have coming up later in the list. It's just a great overall tech piece, and it works well with the deck for what it does. After that, a pretty big hot take is the Gundam NT1. We're running 2 of it, mostly because the effect of the NT1, where it has the ability to deal 1 damage, and if it kills a unit, you get to draw a card, is fantastic. We want that extra bit of card draw if we possibly can. Otherwise, again, it's another ping enabler that makes it to where enemy units are just that little bit smaller, so it makes your opponent really have to think twice before trying to trade or block something. Plus, it has repair too on a 4/4 body. If you link this up with an Amuro Ray, it's just another added tech piece that winds up being a great utility card for the deck. After that, we're doing 2 Gundam Barbatos Fourth Form. This is from the Gundam Assemble kit that came out recently, and honestly, I love the art of this card, and I love the card itself just as much, mostly because of the fact that that suppression that it can gain after dealing and getting damaged is phenomenal. It allows you to get closer to closing out games instead of having to constantly wait for more units on board, it makes it to where it itself can actually close out games. After that, we're running 2 Gundamtcg Rebake Full City, mostly because this is the filler card for the Gundamtcg Rebake standard. I don't currently have 2 copies of it. I know it's fairly cheap and easy to get, but with this, it allows me to also have extra tech for any of the units that I wind up pinging for myself. That added little bit of rest makes it easier to get past other blockers, and it having blocker itself is also phenomenal for those later games where I really need to keep my shields up. And then our last unit is 2 copies of Barbatos Lupus. This I use for those big aggro boards that have a lot of small units. Once I've gotten plenty of units into my trash, by the time that this drops down, I usually have enough to clear 2-3 units off the board, and just makes it easier to close out those games. So that 4th form, primarily meant for that added shield damage. So if my opponent's sitting at 5 shields still for whatever reason, by the time that it drops, I can bring that down to 3, and sometimes I can bring that down to 1. With this, it leaves me open for better tech pieces for getting rid of the opponent's field, and makes it easier to actually swing into my opponent if they're low on shields. After that, we're going into the pilots. Pretty self-explanatory. We're going 4 Mikazuki August and 4 Amuro Ray. So Mikazuki August being the key piece here, allowing it to ping some other units as well as being able to enable some of my units that need to be pinged in order to do significant things. One of the issues that I've come across with it, though, is I found out that if I don't have both targets to deal damage to, the effect is completely null and void. It doesn't do any damage. Whereas Amuro Ray, again, another great tech piece that allows you to rest opponents' units and makes it easier to actually get through blockers. After that, we're running 2 copies of Look of Determination. Just a great overall removal card. Early game, it's good for stuff like your Lifrith and everything else that winds up being an issue with blocker. Otherwise, once you get to the point where you have 10 or more cards in your trash, it is fantastic against some of those bigger units like the Gundam or Strike. And then the list runs 4 copies of Healthy Curiosity. I run Healthy Curiosity mostly in the essence of running this card makes this deck, instead of a 50 card deck, into a 46 card deck. Makes it extra consistent, and with those added 2 in there, so once you have your first 2 in the trash, your next one comes out and it winds up resting a unit. 4th one comes out, it also winds up resting a unit. So just nice added tech to the deck. After that, we're running 2 copies of Fatal Strike, fairly standard removal piece. It's come up in games really consistently, even added to of, and it winds up being extremely helpful whenever I do need to drop it. Other than that, again, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's extra damage on units if you need it on the burst. Otherwise, you start removing units that are level 3 or lower when they become an issue. Then we've got 2 A Show of Resolve. Fantastic draw piece for this deck, and it winds up leading to most of my games going a little bit faster, and I've even hit some points where my opponent's asking how many cards in hand, and I keep telling them that I have 5, and they wind up being surprised. The best thing that I've noticed about this game is that when you have that little bit of added draw, it makes it to where you have more options available to you. And I know most card game players really understand that having draw is fantastic, but it is not well represented in a whole lot of games that I know of aside from Magic. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, yes, you've got your draw, but there's not really anything that's just set, draw 2 cards, and it is as impactful as it is in Magic the Gathering or the Gundamtcg. After that, we've got 2 copies of Corsica Base. Fairly self-explanatory. The first time it drops, you get a Tallgeese token. Fantastic for early game. Afterwards, you get 2 Leos on the second drop of this. I'm only running it as a 2 of, mostly because I don't have the full playset. But the other base that we have in here more than makes up for it in the overall tech of things. And that's where we're going to go on ahead and get into that last card, the Isaribi. Isaribi is absolutely fantastic. You're going to be damaging your units anyway, plus you're going to be making trades, you're going to be swinging into other units. All of your stuff is pretty much going to be damaged, so why not make them bigger whenever they swing the next time around? And that's the whole point of the Isaribi. By setting the active base into rested, you get to give that damaged unit an AP bonus of 2. And in most cases, that has led to me going through EX bases. It has also led to me going through opponent units. And with that, we have the end of our deck profile. And once again, big shout out to Impact Gaming Center. If it wasn't for their support and several also, big shout out to Impact Gaming Center. If it wasn't for card shops like them, we wouldn't be able to give you detailed deck lists and product openings and other content on the channel. As always, support your local LGS. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video to let us know what you want to see next. And you guys have a good one.